Hello and welcome to this videocast for subscribers to davidicke.com. Well, I don't need to tell people in Britain that there's an election on at the moment, a general election to decide the government. Well, that's what they tell us. And of course, in America, that's starting to wind up now with Hillary Clinton announcing this week that she is, open secret of open secrets for years, going to run for president when the Obama period is over. And I've been saying for decades that voting is an irrelevance. And more people are now beginning to see that simple fact. Why? Because a democratic election, a free vote, is only of any significance whatsoever if it involves choice. If you are given a list of people who are basically, all right, little detail here and there, but not much, who are basically standing on the same postage stamp, and in terms of policy and attitude and perspective and perception of reality and the world, pissing in the same pot, then that is not a choice, and thus that is not a free election when it doesn't involve choice. And we've had some T-shirts knocked up to mark this election with the only ballot paper worth having in an election, because it includes the right to vote for none of the above. And that is not rejecting your democratic right. It is actually massively using it to say, I don't support any of this list, this crap, this postage stamp. And thus you're making a statement, by the number of people that do that, of what you feel about the political system. And we don't, of course, have that on the ballot paper. It's vote for this lot, or you've got no other choice. Well, we do. Short of having none of the above on the ballot paper, we can have the right not to vote. Oh, you got to vote in a democratic election. People fought for it. Yeah. You know what they fought for? They fought for political choice, not for the choice of voting for different masks on basically the same face. And so not voting is not a cop-out, it's a statement. It's a statement of what you think about the political system and the corrupt irrelevance of it in terms of people's lives. And as more and more people understand this, we're getting more and more pressure to do what some countries already do, which is to fine people for not voting. I mean, can somebody over here, somebody explain that? This is a democratic country. It's about freedom, but we'll fine you if you don't vote. Because if you don't vote, what you're doing is removing your support and removing credibility from the corrupt, biased, controlled by the few political establishment. And so we have this waste of time called an election. And what happens is different people in little groups, some big groups, who call themselves parties, sit around a table and say, how do we get people to vote for us? And it's not based on how do we respond to what is necessary, what is just, what is right, what is fair. It's what do we have to tell them so they'll vote for us? And they produce things called manifestos saying, vote for us and this is what we'll do. And they go on the telly and they debate and they say, vote for us and this is what we'll do. But of course, history tells a rather different story. It tells a constant story of people saying, vote for us and we'll do this. And then they get into power and they don't do it. Sometimes they do the bloody opposite. Why? Because there's no contract. There's no contract between politicians and political parties and the public. You know, if you buy a washing machine or a Hoover or whatever, there is a contract. What you buy, you must receive. Otherwise, you're breaking the bloody law. And there's a contract. I'll pay you this for that, but that has got to be what I've agreed to pay you for. Now, of course, in politics, it can't be that black and white because of events, but there are clear society-changing policies that should actually be in a contract between the public and the political parties and the politicians that say, look, if we say we'll do this, we'll do this. If we say we won't do this, we won't do this. Classic example: the government or the government during an election, the party of government during an election said in Australia, "You vote for us, we will not introduce a carbon tax." And then, of course, the opposition parties were saying they're going to introduce a carbon tax. That's outrageous. That is a slur. We'll never introduce a carbon tax. What did they do when they got into government? Introduced a carbon tax. That's a classic example of what I mean by there needs to be a contract. Where you say you're going to do this, that's a contract. That's a contract policy. We will do it or we won't do it, depending on what we're saying. And then, at least, people have some kind of greater confidence that what this bloke in the rosette or this lady in a rosette is saying they will or will not do will or will not happen. But that's nowhere near the case. What happens is they say, this is what we're going to do. And then they get into office and they do what they were going to do all along. And when you are moving, irrespective of which major parties in power, towards what I call the Hunger Games society, with a tiny, tiny elite of less than 1%, never mind 1%, controlling all the wealth and all the imposition of society through a police state, leaving the masses, including those that call themselves middle class and well off today, if they're not part of the 1%, as a mass slave society, classically symbolized in the Hunger Games movies, and so many others that have come out in the last 10 years or so. Then what would happen if these political leaders were honest and said, actually, what we're going to do is move us closer and closer to this society. More and more laws, more and more control, more and more deletion of prosperity for the general population. Of course, they wouldn't get in. So they sit around and say, how do we tell people what they want to hear so they vote for us, because then when we get in, we can do what we were going to do all along. This is the political system. And by voting, people are giving their energy, giving their credence, giving credibility to an uncredible, corrupt, and mendacious to its bone marrow political system. So we have a situation where not one single party, not one, I don't care if it's the Greens or We're Alternative and all that stuff, not one is addressing the most obvious, the most blatant, and the most, in general society terms, crucial aspect of what is happening in the world and what has happened for so long. And that is that private banks can create money out of nothing, called credit, where they can lend 10 times and more the money they actually have on deposit in loans. That they can create this money out of fresh air, like I say, called credit, and charge interest on it. And if the people can't pay back the interest and the principal, not least because of economic crises and crashes caused by the same banking system that's doing this, then for that fresh air credit, which has cost the banks nothing, for that, the banks can then take your wealth that does exist. It can take your home, it can take your car, it can take your business, it can take your land, and so on. And this is the process of controlling the monetary system and the very creation of money, so that you then, through that control of money, control people's creativity and whether they can express that creativity. You decide if they have a home or don't have a home, if they have a job or don't have a job, and in the end, whether they live or whether they don't. And it's all based, that control is all based on allowing private corporations, banks, to bring in the overwhelmingly vast majority of money into existence through creating it out of nothing on computer screens and calling it credit or a loan.